Hello, Miss Jody here with the second video for biology that meets on Tuesdays, 1 to 3:30. This second video, hopefully you remember from the first video that we're taking notes on a half sheet so that we can glue them into our journals when we return. Hopefully it doesn't go on too long. I will be keeping up with the journals with the labels so we would be able to just put them right in. If it does go on with too long extended period of time, I could also provide like a drop-off box outside the Science Center since I'm here every day, and you could just drop off stuff from me and I could keep gluing things in, you know, every couple weeks or something like that with your name on it. And any homework that you do also. People have been asking about, do we keep doing the homework? Yep, you keep doing the homework like regular, keep reading the chapters, and then hopefully we can get together soon, and if not, we'll do that drop off, okay? All right, so the last time we talked, we were learning, we're still in Kingdom Plantae, and we talked about the, we started off with how the nutrients are transported in the water through the xylem and the phloem and the processes that go along with that, getting everything where it needs to be. Then we went on to plant responses and how the plant responds to the world around it, plant hormones, the idea of tropism and those sorts of things. And we were going to do some experiments with plant growth and plant responses. And hopefully you can do something at home also and give me some data on. So I did send that one to you now in the diagram form. Now today, we're going on to using plants wisely, which is the last of this chapter. And this is chapter 15, I think. Let me check there. Yeah, 15. And then after this, now we go into Kingdom Animalia after this one. And that's where we'll look at the invertebrates, the vertebrates, and all of those guys. All right, so using plants wisely. How can we use plants to help others and protect the environment? And that's what this whole chapter is about, okay? Plants are very important to our lives, and we're going to see later in one of the notes, just listing so we can get a big view of like, hey, wait, we are dependent upon this Kingdom Plantae far more than what we can understand, or that we normally think of, I guess. So we can use our plants to help others and also be wise with our plants and protecting our environment. So the first thing about this topic is vegetative propagation. So vegetative propagation, this is when a plant actually produces a clone of itself. Now this is important because some plants will reproduce sexually and some will reproduce asexually. Now, when it comes to those that are producing clones of themselves and reproducing asexually, we do have to kind of watch because when these plants are making more of themselves, the babies or whatever, what we call the daughters, are versions of themselves. And so we have a lot of identical genes. And if you study anything in biology, we know that diversity is very important to maintaining this perfect balance. And so some of the plants, they are made to reproduce in this way. It's not that they chose it, but they are made to reproduce in this way. But if we just do our reproduction in one way and we only have that type of genetic coding that keeps happening in every plant, we lose that diversity and then we're in trouble, and we'll talk about that later. Okay, but there are some of the plants that are going to produce more of themselves without this process of mixing. And so we have this vegetative propagation going on under the ground in underground storage structures like bulbs, tubers, corms. And so the book just kind of lays out the difference between the three. And I'm sure you're familiar with bulbs and tubers, might not have been familiar with the word corms. But bulbs are underground buds that produce bulblets that become new plants. So it's kind of, they give the illustration of the onion. So the onion is what we would consider a bulb. Now I think in our book, and let me check this, what page this is on. This is on page 292 and 293. they will give us a picture of this underground situation. So you've got, this is the onion one. So there's one, the bulb. And then it will move on to what the tubers are like in the potato. And then it will move on to what the corms are like in this particular plant that they have of the crocus. And so that will help us divide it out a little bit. Okay, so we have some that will produce bulbs and then be able to produce the new plants through that. Some will produce tubers, and they produce new plants by sending out buds. It's kind of like the little things coming off the potato. The tubers are underground stems that swell to store the nutrients. And so obviously you think of potatoes in those, and then the little things, tubers coming off the potatoes could grow new potatoes. In fact, many of the farmers will just replant the potato as long as it's healthy and disease-free. Corms, this is another one of underground stems that produce cormlets, little baby cormlets that become new plants. And what's different between the corms and the bulbs, now the tubers you can see because it spits out the sides like a potato, but the bulbs and corms look similar, and the difference is the bulbs are layered like the onion, the corms are solid, not layered, okay? And that is a visual they give us of the crocus plant, okay? So we have vegetative propagation, that means producing more new plants of the same kind, can be done through these underground storage components here, bulbs, tubers, corms. But those aren't the only structures that can do it. We also have these structures, other structures. Some particular plants have stems that can make new, and roots that can make new, and even a few that the leaves can make new plants. All right, so the stems, when they're specialized and can make new plants, we call them stolons. So these stolons, these special stems, they're going to produce a new plant that takes root some distance away. So they give us the illustration of strawberries, and you've seen that before. So the strawberry sends out that new specialized stem, and then it drops into a certain area, and you've got new strawberries growing. So that makes sense. Roots. Now, some structures will actually use their roots to send up new baby plants. So the roots send up new shoots that will be connected in a vast root system. So some trees, like the aspens, they will send out these new shoots from their roots actually and grow new trees, and they'll all be connected under the ground. That's pretty cool. Leaves, there's a few plants that will actually produce new plants from leaves. Just a few, and the new plant will be produced when the leaves are placed in soil. And then they're able to grow, and they give us the illustration of the African violet. So this is just showing us, this is introducing us to using our plants wisely, most importantly, because these guys are going to be producing more of themselves in a way where it's genetically cloning them for the most part. There'll be a little variation here and there. Of course, we've got mutations and all those things that we learned about in advanced genetics. So there's some variation, but they're more identically, they're more genetically similar. And that's good, but if all of our plants are done this way, then we would have some problems and we lose our biodiversity. So the next page, which you'd need a next half sheet, most plants that we eat typically reproduce through sexual reproduction, and that's good because then we know that we're going to have a mix-up of the alleles, and we remember that creates the more variety. And remember, we were studying advanced genetics. The more variety, the stronger we have of a particular species. Because let's say, for instance, one particular genetic code is very susceptible to a disease, and then there's another plant that has a different code that is not as susceptible to that particular disease. Well, then it's not going to wipe out all of them. It's only going to wipe out the one that's going to have more of a problem because of its particular code. So the more variety, then we're going to have better biodiversity and more disease resistance in our plants. So even though this is great that we have some of these plants that can reproduce this way on their own, the actual sexual reproduction of plants is going to be good for our robust plant world. Now what happens, and this is why it links under using plants wisely, some farmers want specific kinds and do not want them to mix unless they are the ones mixing it. They're the ones doing it. And the reason is, okay, the farmers are trying to sell a certain product, and so they don't want to just let creation do what it does and let it mix up and create all kinds of things. That's back in the day before when we were just like, hey, whatever grew, we'll eat whatever we get. But in the area of selling things and produce and agriculture and all of those things, then that's going to end up being a problem for the farmers, because when they start mixing up themselves, the farmer's not going to get his product that he so desires, the exact one that he's trying to create. And so many of the farmers and those working agricultural will want to only mix it if they want to do it so they can create the product they want. So they try to isolate some of their plants so that they can't happen on its own. You can't have a mixing and pollination and all that on its own. So they'll try to hand pollinate their plants so that they can mix it with what they want to mix it with. And many times this requires putting them in greenhouses. So in greenhouses, they're only so big, right? So it's kind of hard when it comes to the trees to try to keep them separated, and the fruit trees and all those things they're trying to grow to create our agriculture world, or our produce. So with the trees, a lot of times they'll do grafting. Now what grafting is they will take a branch, a certain branch that they cut off, they call it a scion, and it'll be inserted into the root system or the root of the sapling, which is like a brand new kind of grown tree that's really not super sturdy and grown yet, and they will insert it into that rooted sapling, so that in the end, we call that rooted sapling a stalk. And so the goal is to get the xylem and the phloem to connect of those two plants. The branch that was cut off, its xylem and phloem, and the sampling, or the rooted sapling, its xylem and phloem, so that they will grow together and be connected. And once they grow together and connect, then you pretty much, the scion, this branch that came off, will grow into a tree using the root system of the actual little stock plant that was there, the little rooted sapling. Some orchards do a lot of this grafting to create specific types of fruits that they want, because obviously you can't always grow all your trees in a greenhouse, they're just too big. And so some orchards will do the grafting, and they will sell apple trees that they have grafted that have branches of several different varieties. So you can graft in to that little rooted sapling different types of varieties from different branches, and then it will grow different apples. There's even one that our book talks about, a fruit tree that bears different types of fruit because they've been grafted into the rooted sapling. The one in particular, it talks about a tree that bears apricots, peaches, and plums on different branches. I mean, how cool is that? It's weird, I know, so sci-fi kind of feeling. You got one tree and you go on this branch and it's apricots, and this tree it's peaches, and on this one it's plums. But that would really save a lot of space if you had to grow for your particular family or something like that, or smaller grouping. And then another thing along with grafting is the layering. Now the layering is a process in which a branch of a plant is bent to the ground and a portion of it's buried. So they take the plant and they bend it down to the ground, a portion of it they'll bury in the ground, and the remaining part of the branch is staked up. So the one that once you bend it over, they stake that one up so it can't keep growing towards the bent part to force it to grow up. And when this happens, it's able to allow two plants eventually to grow. But at first, they'll keep them connected so that the plant that's being buried, it can still use the root source of the original plant that it was bent from. And then when it gets strong enough and then creates its own roots, then it can be cut apart and you'd have two plants there. So some farmers will do that. And so when we look at these things, we also have, along with grafting, layering, and then just the regular reproducing sexually or asexually, we have genetic modification. And genetic modification involves the taking of genes from one organism and inserting them into the genome of another organism, which we've talked a little bit about this when we were talking in advanced genetics. And so genetic modification, you're modifying the genes of the original organism. And there's a big long process to understanding how this works. And I'm going to attach a video on genetic modification in the plant world so you can see how this happens and you can get a better feel for it. Now, genetic modification, there's some who hate it, some who love it. And our book leans towards the idea that there's a lot of promising aspects of us learning these methods that were like a puzzle for us to find and can be used for good. And other people, in the book, it talks about, though, if we use it unwisely, it could become dangerous if we don't, test these things and know what we're dealing with. So our book kind of stays in the middle between the two, but you can get some heated discussions in the situation of whether people are gonna like genetic modification or not. But the fact is, it's here and it's something that's everywhere. You find GMO products everywhere, and so you'll have to decide, take that up for your own heart there and figure out where you lie on it. Do some good research. All right, so genetic modification, we can use genetically modified organisms if we use them wisely to create like better rice for those in impoverished areas like the golden rice, and to be able to grow things that are more resistant to pests so that we have better crops. And so there's a lot in the genetic modification world. Again, I'll send you a link. And then this says, okay, now that we see like all the ways that we can grow the plants asexually or sexually, or to intervene ourselves as farmers do to kind of create what they want to create, or even genetic modification, we have to kind of come back and say, okay, the topic is using plants wisely. So all of this is in that topic. Why? Because when we're doing all these things, we have to make sure we are understanding the importance of the plant in our life. So it's so important to our life. And I just listed a few from the book here. Obviously, food. We rely on plants for our food source. Some of our clothing is made from our cotton, our flax, all that is clothing. Our shelters, our houses are built from wood. Sometimes we heat our homes with wood burning stoves and such. The plant world, the process of transpiration, if you remember in the water cycle, when we learned about that particular chapter, when the water cycle, we've got all this water cycling around, and some of it's coming out of the leaves of the trees and being returned to the environment. So it's a major part of the water cycle that these plants are providing, and it's filtered, right? Because it's went through its process. And then not only that type of filtering, but this filtering that is on the ground filtering, because the plants are embedded into the soil and their roots and everything. And as the water's flowing through, the plants will take up some of those things in the soil that could be harmful, like say, for instance, unabsorbed fertilizers. And so as those unabsorbed fertilizers are moving through the soil, they'll eventually make it to our streams and our lakes and our aquifers and pollute them. So our plants will bring up a lot of those and actually use it as nutrients, some of it, and it will filter out the water in the watersheds and the aquifers, the streams and the lakes, and so on. Also, the plants are going to be important to our local climate. We don't realize this a lot, and they're starting to realize this in big cities, but plants have a big effect on the temperature and how things work. So in the bigger cities, they're starting to realize that all they have is brick and concrete. Then they started planting some gardens and some parks, and they started planting these even on tops of roofs in the cities, because it has a big part in the control of the climate. The other thing that plants are important for is controlling erosion. And we know erosion is when the process, the soil or whatever, is actually moved by water or wind, or something moves it out of the place it normally should be. And you don't want that to happen, because you lose the soil. And when you lose it, then you can't grow good plants there. And so large amounts of fertilizer are also in this runoff situation that would, if as the soil would be eroding away, and it would run into all of the lakes and the streams. And many times when that happens, it creates algal blooms. And sometimes those algal blooms are dangerous because they use up the oxygen, and they or I mean, they use up the nutrients, they overproduce, and then it, you know, kills out the fish and all that. And some of them create toxins. And so controlling erosion is very important. You want those roots down in to hold the soil in place when you have disastrous water flowing through, and floods and storms and wind and all that stuff. And then also, we can't forget that they use the carbon dioxide that we don't want our whole world filled with. So they use that carbon dioxide, and in the process of using that carbon dioxide, they also produce our oxygen, or O2. And so if you look at just this as a simple review of like plants' importance, you realize, oh boy, yeah, no, we better make sure this is used wisely and going good. So with that, in the book, it talked about there's also a few things that the plants need us for, in a sense. And so one of the examples was the banana, and how the banana, the way that it's genetically, or its genes, and having the certain amount of the chromosomes, then we don't really have the seeds of the banana, and so we have to make sure that we grow banana trees in a different way. So I thought would be fun, since the last one we did diagrams, I thought would be fun, we'd do a little art project here. So this is why I have glued in a little green sheet here, and I'm going to be sending you a little link on how to do some banana origami. And this is hilarious, because I have tried origami 2 times in my teaching career of 20 plus years, right? And it was and both of them were in the study on marine biology. And we got to, the crustaceans, and somebody showed me, or I came across a video of creating an origami crab. And I thought, this will be fun. This has got to be easy. And we watched this video in class, and we worked on this crab. And I can't remember, we also did one other one. And it was a nightmare. I mean, I wanted to cry. I could not get my folds right. And it's a big joke of anybody that was in the marine biology class that year, the high school class, because I said, I'll never do origami again. But I think you guys could have some fun with the origami banana, because you could actually sit there and watch the video at home and try to spend your time making the folds right. It's just definitely not a good thing to do in class together, because we would watch the video and then we'd try to fold, and then someone would go to the next fold and be, wait, can you go back? I don't have my fold right. And so we could not get these crabs. I mean, I think we eventually did, or I eventually had one of the students that was better at it make my crab for my book. But anywho, with a yellow piece of paper, and on the video it has like a yellow with a white back paper on the back of it, and you don't have to use fancy origami paper. You can just cut your own out of yellow paper or whatever you can find. It can be white paper, and you can color it, who knows, whatever. And I thought you could practice a few different origami bananas and create an origami banana for this, and then I'll glue it on a green sheet. Actually, I'll already probably glue the green sheet into your journal, and then you can just bring me the banana whenever we get our stuff for our journals together. Okay, all right, so that ends chapter 15, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do the test on in this online format. I'll figure that out and be sending that to you, and you can study up for chapter 15. I think we might have also missed chapter 14's test, because it was going to be when we returned and then everything happened in our world. Yeah, actually, I see chapter 14's missing. So I'm probably going to have you study on both chapters just as a review. And well, maybe, how about I'll just put chapter 14 in our books blank, and we can use that as a review when we get back and do that one together. And I'll just find a way to create chapter 15 for you to do at home, okay? All right, so hopefully things are going well, and I hope you make some great bananas. Send me some pictures, if you do, of your origami times. And please, if you cry during this time and it's piercing to your soul like it is for me to do origami, please get some good selfies for me for the journal and send those on. Thanks.